The Subaru Impreza sees some pretty big changes here for 2024 as we enter the 7th generation, including bringing back the RS trim level. As always, I'm going to go through this thing from the outside in, talk about what it's been like to live with for the past week. Let's go ahead and take a look. Underneath the hood here, man, this thing is low. We are looking at the new engine option here for 2024. If you're in the base or the sport, you're still going to get the 2-liter that we're used to seeing from last year and from last generation. Here in the RS, you get the 2.5-liter. It is still a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, but it bumps up your power, bumps up your torque. 182 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque. So nice little bump there over that 2-liter. This year, though, they have completely dropped the manual transmission, so this is going to be mated to a CVT. Thought that was a little bit of a strange move, especially bringing back the RS and not having the manual available with the RS. Not going to dwell on it too much here, but I would have loved to have seen the 6-speed from the Crosstrek or from the old Forester in this car here, especially since the 5-speed wasn't particularly good, but the 6-speed would have been great to see, especially here in this RS trim level. And in terms of fuel economy, looking at about 30 combined here. It drops a little bit when you get the bigger engine, but only by about 1 mile per gallon. Subaru's bread and butter is making all-wheel drive wagons without using the term wagon anywhere in the marketing materials. People buy them like crazy despite saying that they don't like wagons. It's probably the official vehicle of the Northeast up here or anywhere with inclement weather. But this one is technically a 5-door hatchback. It's low, it's long, it looks a lot like a wagon to me. But this is the only way you can now get the Impreza here for 2024. The sedan version of the Impreza is completely gone. And despite how long this looks, it's actually only about 176 inches overall. It's a little bit shorter than even a Civic hatchback. So pretty small here, pretty compact. 105 inches on the wheelbase, nice and compact as well, will help with the handling, as will these little banana peel tires with the big wheels on it, because this does come on the 18s. The RS gets the 18s, as does the Sport. You're going to be on 16s if you are in the base level. You also get bigger brakes here if you are in the Sport or in the RS trim level. Got some of this black trim going on. Make it a little bit more sporty looking here. And the RS badge, of course. Make sure that you know that this is the RS, the Rally Sport version of this car. We got the black mirrors with the integrated turn signals, heated blind spot monitoring in those, all standard for the RS trim. If you are in the Sport trim, then you'll get the integrated turn signals. They'll be body colored. You're going to have to option the blind spot monitoring and the heat. If you're in the base trim, then they're going to be black, no integrated turn signals, no blind spot monitoring, no heat, not even as an option. Seems like in 2024 here, we should pretty much have blind spot monitoring standard on every car, but we're not quite there yet. And the Sport and the RS will get you the keyless lock and unlock. Always like to see that. Up in the front here, we got all this real cooling going on. This is all open space for air to go through. Love to see that. And with the black, it sort of sets off the white a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily get this in white. They've got some great reds and blues available, but if you are going to get the white, the black really does sort of set that off pretty well here. No parking sensors or anything. Looks like they've already got pre-drilled holes in case you have to put a license plate on it. You've got some contour through here. We got the LED headlights. These are auto high beams, and they are cornering lights. Doesn't even matter if you're in the base trim level, the base, the Sport, or the RS. They all get the cornering lights. Great visibility at night. Love to see that. The fog lights, you do have to go up in the trim levels, though. Have to get either the Sport or the RS if you want to get those fog lights. Back end here, I love what they've done with the tail light design here with the red and the black and the white. Looks great, as well as some of the black trim all around here. You got your brake light through there. You do have a rear wiper. Love to see that on a hatchback or a wagon, as I'm going to call this thing. RS badge down here, some more black down here to sort of set things off. All for show, really. There is a backup camera. There are no parking sensors or anything going on back here, though. There's no kick to open, no power open, anything like that. The key does have a button for the hatch. but that is really just to unlock the hatch. If the car is locked and you have the RS with the keyless entry though, you can just walk up and grab it and it'll unlock and open right up though. We're looking at about 20 cubic feet of space, just over that, sort of on par with something like a GTI. Civic hatchback is going to be a little bit more. Mazda 3 hatchback is going to be just under this here. Pretty solid amount of space back here. Got some hooks going on, just a little bit of space for storage underneath here. You do have space for tools. You got a tire mobility kit, no spare tire down under there, and the RS gets you a privacy cover as well. And there's a grab handle here so you don't have to grab the paint to close it. On the inside here, we are in an entry-level Subaru, not exactly expecting a life of luxury, but it is pretty decent in here. We're starting down at 23 grand. The RS is going to give you pretty much every single option at 27 grand. Other than there's an optional package on top of that, that's another 2 grand that you can only get with the RS. That's going to give you the sunroof, the Harman Kardon sound system, and the power adjustable seats. So we're topping out around 29,000 here in this one. If you want to know what the differences are between all the different trim levels, I'm going to link the Subaru comparison tool down below. It's actually one of the better OEM comparison tools. That'll give you a better idea of what the differences are between the different trim levels. But we'll go through how this interior is here in general. We do have the leather wrap steering wheel. We got the red stitching. We got the red on the seats as well, the red bolsters, because this is the RS, the sportier Rally Sport edition here. So they're going for a little bit of a sportier look. Subaru is committed to net zero when it comes to buttons. They took all the buttons out of the infotainment here and they put them all in the steering wheel. Now, it's not really like that many buttons when you start looking at some of the other OEMs are doing, but just the way that it's laid out makes it feel a little bit busy, but really not the end of the world here once you figure out where everything is. We do have the paddle shifter, since this has the 8 simulated gears in the RS trim here, and also in the sport trim you'll get the simulated gears, but it is a CVT. Gauge cluster, I like the big tack and the big speedometer there, and it's got the red trim with the RS in there. Looks great, but the little sort of informational screen in the middle is very, very busy. I think if you're going to put that much information in there, you got to have a bigger screen. It gets a little crowded when you have everything turned on, when you have all your driver's assist. It's got the adaptive cruise, it's got the lane centering, it's got your sport mode. You can go through your SI drive mode. You can go through some different information in there for your fuel economy, your tire pressure, general vehicle information. It just gets a little bit crowded in there. So I wish the screen was either a little bit bigger or they just simplified and sort of left some of that stuff out. But I do like that there are still analog gauges with analog pins. So, that is definitely nice to see. We do have some sort of hard plastics going on, these like shiny hard plastics. Subaru uses this in a lot of their cars. It makes it feel a little bit cheap. It is a $29,000 car here, so not exactly again, like I said, not exactly life of luxury, but I guess it's better than if they used gloss black. It would just be nice if they used a little bit of texture on it to make it feel a little bit less cheap. But the rest of the materials here, the plastics up here have some texture to it. We've got the cloth in here, so it's really not too bad here in terms of look and feel here, in terms of whether it looks cheap or feels cheap. But generally speaking, it doesn't really look like it's super cheap, other than the shiny hard plastic, and then there's some gloss black through here, which I don't love, but not a ton of it. We do have the wireless charger because this is the RS trim, along with an aux and some USBs right there. And this actually lights up. The wireless charger will light up at night, which I don't really understand. If you're somebody that likes to drive like in the dark when it's dark out, like maybe you like to turn off your screen, or you just don't like to have a lot of extra lights on, I'm not really sure how to turn that off, or if it is even, I haven't found a way to turn it off. But if you have your phone there, then it'll reflect off of your phone and just make it brighter. So a little bit strange, and your phone is backlit anyway, so I'm not really entirely sure what the thinking was with the light down there. But the charger itself does work pretty well, and I like that it's sort of a tray here, so it's going to stay in the charger. It's not going to slide out. Nice big infotainment screen here, the big sort of tablet thing. It is not tacked on, at least it is integrated pretty well. This is the upgraded multimedia system that you're going to see in the Sport and the RS. The base is going to give you a different one. But if you want the wireless Android Auto, wireless Apple CarPlay, you have to get the upgraded screen here. My only real issue with the wireless Android Auto has been the fact that it'll start playing music from the radio, and then after like a minute it'll connect to my phone and switch over, which wouldn't really be that big of a deal if I didn't have to crank the volume higher on the Android Auto. So you'll get in the car and it'll like blare the radio, and then after a minute it'll switch to Android Auto, and then the sound will be a little bit more normalized there. But it is a little bit of an annoying sort of thing. Lots of information sort of buried in here. It's got sort of the app set up here, so you got the icons with the big icons that are easy to use. A little bit on the laggy side, but not really too bad here. Vehicle settings, driver's assist features. Your auto start stop is in here. They did make that easily accessible right here. You got your driver's assist, your vehicle settings, your vehicle information settings here. The HVAC is in here. There are actually some physical buttons on the side for your defroster, front and rear, and your temperature control on the side here, as well as your volume knob, your tuning knob. But your HVAC is mostly going to be controlled down here at the bottom, and it does have the dual zone climate here, actually standard. Doesn't matter what trim level you get. Your device and your profile management are here as well. You know, simple infotainment works fine. I do wish that they would have gone with a horizontal instead of a vertical, just because like your backup camera ends up being really small, and some of the Android Auto features end up just being really small because there's only so much horizontal space you can use. The mirror here, you can option an auto dimming mirror with home link. This one does not have it. Mirror is fine. You get pretty good visibility out the back actually with this thing. Got the power tilt and slide sunroof here, as I mentioned, part of that optional package that's only available on the RS trim, as well as the 10-speaker Harman Kardon. Base is going to give you a 4-speaker. The Sport is going to give you a 6-speaker, and then the RS is also going to give you a 6-speaker unless you option the 10-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. Got heated seats in this one, standard. In the RS, you do have to option those if you get the Sport trim. Electronic parking brake, a couple of cup holders. We do have a 12 volt down here, as well as a little bit of extra space. I've been putting my garage door holder there. A little bit of extra space there as well. Back seats, 36.5 inches of leg room. Pretty decent considering the car overall is 176 inches. So it's just on the smaller side here for a car in general, and pretty decent in terms of back seat space. I fit fine back there. I always do. I'm 5'7". So not really an issue for me. If you're on the taller side, you might need a little bit more space, or if you're sitting behind a tall driver, might be a bit of an issue. But 36.5 inches legroom is pretty decent for a compact car here. They don't have any vents back there, but they do have a couple of USBs. They do all have 3-point harnesses, so there is a seatbelt that will pull from the roof for the center seatbelt there. So they do have 3-point, a little bit of extra safety for that. But generally speaking, pretty nice back there. I wish they did have some vents. I wish this sunroof went back all the way. Again, we're talking sub 30 grand here. Pretty decent space for this price point. Those angry CVT noises. All right, so I've been driving this around for the last week. As always, this is my daily driver for the week. I'm doing regular stuff, going to work, dropping the kids off at school. YouTube is not paying my bills. My expectations were a little bit all over the place here. You know, the RS trim is supposed to be more enthusiast-focused, yet we still have a CVT. They completely dropped the manual transmission. A short wheelbase, 105 inches, plus these big 18s with these banana peel thin sidewall tires on them. So didn't really expect the daily drive to be a whole lot better, because you know that doesn't really translate to great ride quality. You know, Subaru sort of said they focused on the sport and the utility. In the past, Subarus have a lot of times, you know, the Forester, the Outback especially, are more like utilitarian, not exactly necessarily like fun cars. They're more utility. They get the job done. I'll say things have definitely been flipped around for me in my mind here. This experience has really it's exceeded my expectation in both the sporty driving, the spirited drives, as well as the daily drive. The daily drive first, because most of the time this is going to be your daily driver. It rides really surprisingly well, even with these giant wheels, with the thin tires and the short wheelbase. It rides really, really nicely, and I was very surprised by that. It's a really comfortable ride. Now, the seats could use a little bit more comfort. They have said that they've updated the seats. They've updated the cabin in general to be a little bit more driver focused, a little more comfort focused. They have added some sound deadening and updated the seats. Bolstering is great. The lumbar support is great. I just think the cushion at the bottom could use a little bit more cushion to it. I think with my Forester, it was not a problem of the daily drive. It was more a problem of the long road trips, where that's when my back would start to hurt after a long time in the car. And I think this one sort of has that same kind of issue. If I was in this car for a long period of time, I would probably start to have some back pains. But in the short drives and the daily drive, where my drive is like 45 minutes at a time, not really too big of an issue. Sound deadening around town, totally fine. On the highway here, there is some wind noise. There's quite a bit of road noise. Really, that's just the highway, and so it's still sub $30,000. It's not exactly expected to be super quiet sanctuary in here. We have the eyesight safety features here, which is like your pre-collision warning, your pre-collision braking. We've got adaptive cruise control. We've got your lane departure. You got your lane centering. It's that sort of whole suite, and most of that stuff does stay out of the way pretty well. The lane departure, you can turn off. Really everything in the eyesight, you can go through the infotainment and turn it off. You do have to stop the car to turn off a lot of the features, so it's a little bit cumbersome to get to if you're in the middle of driving. You can at least go through and turn all of that stuff off if you really don't like it, but like I said, most of the time it's pretty much stayed out of my way. It hasn't really been an issue. The adaptive cruise works well. It goes down to stop and go traffic as well. The lane centering is sort of middle of the pack in terms of how well it works. It's not going to be as good as like a Volkswagen or a Hyundai or Kia. Those lane centering systems are some of the best, but it's up there with like the Honda system. It's above Volvo Polestar in terms of how it functions. So it works fine, works pretty well. No issues there. And then the fuel economy, I'm getting about 24 miles per gallon. I'm pushing it a little bit more than most people are going to be on their daily drive. It's rated up close to 30 average for a mix of city and highway, which is pretty good for something with all-wheel drive. They did keep the weight down. It does have a CVT, so your efficiency goes up a little bit. Now, in terms of spirited driving, really I'm conflicted mostly about the transmission. I said I wasn't going to dwell on it, but this is, when you're starting to push it as spirited drives, this is where the transmission really comes into play here. The CVT is fine. It's not like it's in the way. It gets out of the way. It does its job. It has the 8 fixed gears, the sort of simulated gears. If you put it into this SI drive mode, it'll hold your revs higher, and it's responsive. It works fine. It is a little bit droning when you're starting to stomp on it. It's like angry CVT noises, but for the most part, the sound is pretty well insulated when you're just on your daily drive. But again, the spirited drives, that's when you're going to really hear it. And while a CVT would not be my first choice for something that I'm going to push, it's been implemented well. It does the job. I don't feel like it's in my way. That being said, I still wish it had a manual. I still wish, once you're starting to push it, starting to rev it out, you can still have fun with this. You can still have fun revving it out and pushing it, and the power is there. This has like enough power that it's not annoying, but it has a low enough amount of power that you get the slow car fast kind of fun to it. So the slow car fast thing really benefits so much from a manual transmission. Now, the 5-speed in the old Impreza was not particularly good. In fact, it was probably one of my least favorite manual transmissions, but I wish they would have put the 6-speed from the Crosstrack or the Forester or the WRX, one of those other 6-speeds in it. It would have been great. That would have really been a game changer and probably made me highly consider getting this car and trading in my GTI. If you don't care about the manual, the CVT, it's not bad, right? It's actually much better than I expected. We'll put it that way. And like I said, it'll help with your efficiency and stuff. Beyond the transmission here, we've got bigger brakes because we're in the RS trim. The Sport and the RS get slightly bigger brakes than the base trim. Haven't had any issues with the brakes. You know, if it had more power, if it had a turbocharger, then I'd probably want bigger, like Brembos or something. But for the amount of power this has, I feel like the brakes are pretty solid. Look at that. Auto start stop feature tells you exactly how many minutes and seconds you've used it for. I've saved 0.1 gallons of gas, crushing it. And then in terms of handling here, this again is an area where it's exceeding my expectations here. It does have the short wheelbase, it's got the big wheels, so that does help there. They've updated the structure here with a lot of structural adhesives, 10% more torsional rigidity, as well as, you know, extra chassis stiffness all around with all these structural adhesives. Really, it does very well if you start to throw it through corners. Feels like it's pretty well balanced. It doesn't feel like you have any issues with grip, and it doesn't roll a ton. It's much more composed than I expected it to be in the corners, especially for something with such a short wheelbase. They have taken some steering components from the WRX. The steering is very direct, it's very responsive. It's not particularly communicative, but it gets the job done in a way that really contributes to that spirited drive, if that makes sense. The other thing about the steering wheel is it's not blocking like gauge cluster. It seems to be a big issue a lot of times these days. So in summary of the drive here, exceeding expectations in both the daily drive and the spirited drives. This thing is a blast to drive if you start to push it. Really does work well, even in the manual mode, even if there are simulated gears here that are, well, not simulated, they're fixed gear ratios in the CVT. I just really wish it had the 6-speed, but outside of that, it's actually a pretty fun car to drive. Overall, Subaru really has done a great job with this car. I love that they kept the wagon around, even if I'm not supposed to call it a wagon. Symmetrical all-wheel drive. I love that they have the adaptive headlights now. That 2.5-liter engine really does add some much-needed pep. It is actually a pretty sporty driving experience. If you really do want to throw it through some corners, it is pretty well balanced here. They did a great job with this. I will admit that in the past, I have not necessarily been the biggest fan of a lot of the Subaru vehicles just because they are fairly utilitarian. This one is actually pretty fun to drive when you start to push it. My only real qualm is I wish they had put that 6-speed in it. That really would have added a lot of extra fun, especially in this RS trim. But like I mentioned, I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Overall, they really have done a great job with this car. As always, thank you for watching. If I missed anything, if you have differing opinions, if you have similar opinions, let me know down in the comments below. Hit all the YouTube buttons, the like, the share are what are going to help me the most get into more cars, bring more cars to you. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.